Hi everybody, in this video we are going to be talking about the basic care of the elusive pink-tongued skink. Now, as always, please sit back, relax and enjoy the content. Pink-tongued skinks are endemic to eastern Australia. These guys will inhabit kind of like rainforested areas and woodland areas also. Their body is well adapted for this, so these kind of like torpedo, slender, slimline animals are really good at navigating through the tropical rainforested floors. So you'll typically find them in like leaf litter. In terms of size, these animals can reach up to around about 45 centimeters or 18 inches. So what kind of enclosure do we recommend for pink-tongued skinks? Now, in the past, it's been recommended to use 24 inches by 18 by 18 or a 36 by 18 by 18. Nowadays, we recommend a minimum of a 3 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. If you want to go larger, do so. These guys will utilize the space, especially now we know that they climb. So if you want to go for something a little bit taller and a little bit longer, go for it. Let's move on to heating then. So how are we going to heat these reptiles and what temperatures do we need for them? So for a pink-tongued skink, a basking spot temperature we would recommend to be around about 32 to 35 degrees. The warm side would recommend a little bit cooler than that. So we would typically say around about 27, 28 degrees in the warm end, and then on the cool end, around about 23 to 25 degrees. At nighttime, you can cool these animals down to around about 18 to 20 degrees. We would typically recommend more on the 8, 19, 20 degrees kind of area. But if it does drop below to 18 degrees, then you should be absolutely fine. We've mentioned about our temperatures and our temperature guides. So what about humidity? Do these guys need humidity? So yes, they do. So for quite a long time, pink-tongued skinks in captivity have gone without. We used to keep them a little bit more arid than what we should typically do so. So we would now say to have them at around about 70 to 80% humidity. If you do find that your enclosure is dipping into like the mid to low like 60s, what you can also do is offer humid hides. Now you can do this by literally getting some of like the pre-made hides and just whacking a bit of sphagnum moss or any other moisture absorbing substance in there that's safe to use with reptiles, or you can do the same but with some cork bark. The reasons why we recommend to have like humid hides and whatnot inside the enclosure is number one, for thermoregulation, so the animal can like cool down if it wanted to. Number two, for hydration. So this is where we're going to find the skink drinking quite a lot. So it'll drink like some of like the dew and stuff that forms like on the inside of the hide. And three, for ease of maintaining the skin. So when it sheds its skin, it's going to be a lot easier for this animal to get it off. So what products should we actually use to like heat the enclosure? This is completely up to you. There are lots of brands that are available. What we tend to use here are the Arcadia halogens. We will also use the Zoomed halogens as well, along with the Reptile Systems halogens also. As with all heating equipment, you're going to want to have something that controls it. So you're not going to want it plugged straight directly into the mains. This is why we would always recommend having a thermostat. Now, because you have a light emitting heat source in there, we would always recommend using a dimming thermostat. Make sure that you do check your dimming thermostat. Some only go up to around about 30, so definitely make sure that your thermostat can go up to the temperatures as previously described. If you're one of those people that on a nighttime it gets really, really cold, then we would also recommend that you have an additional source of heating. So this can be done through a ceramic heat bulb. Now, you can pop these on a dimming thermostat, but the best thermostat to use with these is a pulse proportional. So on your pulse proportional thermostat, just make sure that you set it for anywhere between 18 to 20 degrees, just so you're going to maintain a nice ambient temperature in there. Now, don't get confused. The ceramic heat bulb is not a replacement for a basking spot bulb. We now have the equipment inside our enclosure to control the temperature, but you are also going to need items to tell you what temperature it is. Now, these come in the form of thermometers. So you can get the standard dial thermometer, or if you want to be a little bit more accurate, you can get the digital ones. This also works for testing your humidity. You can get the dial hygrometers, or you can also get the digital hygrometers as well. We would always typically recommend that you have at least 2 thermometers in there, but if you want to add some more in there just so that you can be aware of what temperature it is and you get a better understanding of how hot it is in there, then that's absolutely fine to do so. When people come into our store and they talk to us about like pink tongue skinks and wanting to own a pink tongue skink, they always bring up the same thing. Now, do they need UVB? Because they've read online and various other places that pink tongue skinks do not need UVB. This is simply not the case. All reptiles should have access to UVB. Now, these animals require a UVI between like 2 and between 4. The bulbs we would typically recommend are going to change depending on how tall your enclosure is. If your enclosure is 18 inches tall, then we would recommend a 6% bulb from Arcadia or a Zone 2 from Reptile Systems. If your enclosure is a little bit taller than that, so we're talking maybe like 24 inches, so like 2 foot tall, then we would recommend a Zone 3 or a 12% bulb. The reason for the difference in like the bulbs and the height and stuff is because of your UVI. So how much UV is going to be penetrating down the further you go. If you're still a little bit unsure about what bulbs and stuff to pop inside your enclosure, you could always pop into your local exotic store or maybe even talk to a vet. Another form of lighting that we would so recommend that you pop in there is LED. So this is good to give them a photo period, and the more light we can pump inside of our enclosure, the better. So the LEDs kind of do a better job at filling in some of the blanks for sunlight. So they're not going to super 100% replicate sunlight, but they're going to do a really good job. Are we going to be keeping all of these lights on 24/7? This is a question that we get asked quite a lot, and the answer to that is no. What you want to do is you want to create a nice 12-hour cycle, so 12 hours on and 12 hours off. So moving on to substrates. So again, this is something that is a little bit controversial. We've seen online, and we've had people come into our store that have inquired about pink tongues and stuff, that they want to keep them on like just like sands and stuff like that because they think that they are a desert dwelling species. But in terms of substrate, we would always recommend using like soil-based substrates. So a really good one to use would be like the Zoomed Reptisoil. You can use the Arcadia Jungle Earth. You can use cocoa fiber. Any soil-based substrate should be absolutely fine to use. We would also recommend that your substrate is quite thick. As previously said, these guys do like to dig. So in the wild, they will dig so they can find things like earthworms and other food items that live in the soil. Another good thing about having a really thick substrate is that it's going to regulate your humidity a lot better in your enclosure. Another little handy tip to regulate the humidity a lot better is also popping down leaf litter in the enclosure. By adding leaf litter into the enclosure, it is going to help lock in that much needed humidity. It's also going to create varying degrees of different humid microclimates within your enclosure that the animal can explore, it can go in, it can go out of. It's all about choice for your animal. In the wild as well, not only in the substrates, but they will also find food within the leaf litter. So if you've released any like live feeder insects, that type of thing, the animal is going to be able to find them. Moving on to decor now. Branches, logs, rocks, that type of thing. It's all really good stuff to add in there for your pink tongue skink. As previously said, they do like to have a little bit of a climb. So as long as the animal can like really like grab round like the log or like the rock and stuff and isn't going to fall off it, then you should be absolutely fine by adding it in there. So diet, this is another spicy issue that we get spoken about quite a lot in here. The main one is cat food. Can you feed skinks cat food? Well, theoretically, yes, you can feed skinks cat food. However, it's not something we would really recommend you do. If you're in a pinch and fair enough, like go for it. But these animals will not eat cat food in the wild. These guys will predate mainly on invertebrates, and more specifically, they will eat things like slugs and snails. Slugs and snails are going to make up the majority of this animal's diet. Pink-tongued skinks have got specialized teeth, which is a really cool adaptation. This adaptation has helped them crack the shells of snails. So the actual design of the teeth is like quite like flat and round, and this is going to help for that crushing power from their jaws. A commonly asked question that we get here is, so like, where do we source snails from? So here we do sell them, but you can also get them and rear them yourself. You can also get like the canned ones if you wanted to. Sometimes you can get them from like supermarkets and stuff, mainly down the French aisle. But what you must not do is get snails from the wild. One of the main reasons why we don't typically recommend going out in your gardens or going out in the wild and getting wild caught specimens to feed is because skinks are still susceptible to pathogens that these animals can still carry. So in the UK, we suffer quite badly from lungworm and heartworm in like dogs and stuff like that. So skinks are also susceptible to this. So do not feed from the wild, please. So what are the common behaviors of pink-tongued skinks? So in my experience, pink tongues have always been one of those creatures that are a little bit more elusive. They're not really fond of like being like picked up or anything like that. Some you can get away with. Some are like, okay, this is fine, I'll tolerate this. However, some really, well, most of them really don't like it. So what these guys will do to let you know that they don't like something is they will kind of like be a little bit standoffish, so they can sometimes puff themselves out. But 9 times out of 10, they will open their mouth and they will flap their tongue about really quickly, kind of like waving like a flag in the wind on a really windy day. These guys can also sometimes do like bluff charges as well, which is quite cute-ish. I have been tagged by quite a few pink-tongued skinks in my time, and let me tell you, their bites do in fact hurt. And that about wraps us up for this video. So thank you very much for sticking right to the end. As always, please make sure that you give us a like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Auf Wiedersehen.